And moving forward towards our next panel discussion, a reminder to all our guests to please put up the questions. And like we've said before, the best question is going to win a prize. Please use our hashtag #ETHousingFinance. And let's put our hands together as I welcome on stage our panel chair, Ms. Kavita Krishnan, Head of News, Magicbricks now. Let's put our hands together for the lady. I'd also like to welcome on stage our panelist, Mr. Rakesh Singh, Chief Executive Officer, Aditya Birla Housing Finance. Warm welcome to you, sir. Let's put our hands together for Mr. Harshil Mehta, CEO, DHFL. A warm welcome to Mr. Vaithianathan Ramachandran, Managing Director, Tata Capital Housing Finance. I'm sure we have enough and more energy. And Mr. Maneesh Srivastava, CEO, Muthoot Housing Finance Company. A warm welcome to Mr. Shekhar Godgalkar, Executive Director, Khush Housing Finance. After about 45 minutes of our panel discussion, we'd like to open the house for questions, and a reminder to all of you to please put them online so that we can select the best few. Over to our panel chair.
Bail is there, I'll take it.
I'd like to request all of you to please bear with us as we mic up our guests.
So hello and welcome, and we are going to be discussing how the regulatory environment, and when we say the regulatory environment over here, we are talking about the regulatory environment of real estate and how that is proving to be a bottleneck for essentially financing all those affordable homes that we are speaking about. And gentlemen, we have a tough act to follow. We don't have the sleep-inducing properties of the Rabdi Jalebi, nor do we have the charms of Mr. Oberoi over here. But we'll do our best. We have a stellar panel. So let's get started. Now, everyone over here is in the home finance business, and I just thought I'll throw some numbers. I'm sure all of you are familiar with it. Home loan share currently is at an 8-year high in non-food credit. These are the recent RBI numbers. We are talking of 11.8% of outstanding loans, some 7.73 lakh crores that has been lent only to finance homes. So demand clearly is not a big problem over here. There is a huge amount of demand out there in the market. The problem is how do we get the money to those people who actually need it. And that's why we've got all of you guys here. All of you, each of you in fact head businesses, and you are trying to take those businesses to the next level. You are looking at affordable housing as the next big thing. So let's start. Why don't you all start by telling us what are the biggest problems you face when you actually have to finance an affordable housing project? What is the one big problem that each of you faces? Can we start with you, Shekhar?
Well, I think mainly the availability of good builders right now. I think there were not too many quality builders in this business before. With the change in the tax structure, which has gone to the advantage of builders, I think a large number of big builders are coming into the business now and setting and working on affordable home projects. I think with that, I think the things like constraints on delivery time and those kind of things will really move out, and the customers would get proper homes from these developers. But however, the small builders will continue to be in the fray. They are not going to move out of the business. They're going to be there. I think with respect to that, the new regulation that has come out controlling the builders, the upper middle class, and the higher level customers are aware of the regulation, but our customer, who's an affordable housing finance customer, would not really be educated about that regulation. So I think it will come upon us as housing finance companies in the affordable finance sector to really educate our customer about that regulation and to inform him that he has rights if delivery does not happen, and those kind of things. So and plus I think there should be some kind of a structure that develops in amongst the players in this industry, where builders who don't deliver in time, builders who don't meet their commitments, some kind of a database comes out. The regulation is there, but the regulation is not going to ensure that every finance company knows about defaulting builders. So it's essential that some kind of a body gets formed where names of these defaulting builders or the builders who don't deliver in time is shared amongst everybody, so that all are aware, and it will become a deterrent for builders not deliver in time or not provide good quality households.
So the capability to deliver on time.
That needs to be controlled, so that it doesn't so happen that the delay in delivery results in the customer paying rent and housing loan EMIs at the same time. That would most certainly turn him into a defaulter.
That's a valid point, especially considering the fact that we are facing so many project delays across the country. I mean, buyers nowadays are scared of putting their money in an under construction project simply because they do not know when they are going to get to see that home. Harshil, what do you think is the biggest problem?
See, from an affordable housing perspective, if you look, Kavita, financing is never an issue. Okay. One of the biggest challenges which perhaps lie in front of us is the question of supply of affordable housing, and whether this supply is also coming in the places, in the locations where it is required. You have situations where you have a high inventory, but those inventory is lying in those areas where there is not much demand. So more than the supply, it's also a question of whether the supply is coming in at the right place. Along with that is also another aspect is what kind of construction is happening when you look at affordable housing, because purely from a financing perspective, if you look, it is also equally important that various things which are related to housing, which the most important of that is the titles, where the titles are absolutely clear in those scenarios, because that forms the basis of the security. Second aspect is also to do with whether all the necessary approval plans are in place. See, many times it so happens that you may have received plan approvals with certain conditions to be fulfilled, and actually at the ground level, when you go for financing, you find that the necessary approvals are not in place to the extent to what kind of construction is happening. And all this also results in a situation where the finance company, the financier, becomes responsible for those acts because they went ahead and financed those kind of properties which may not technically be acceptable as security. So along with the affordable housing, there are a lot of other finer details which needs to be seen and need to ensure that they are complied with. For example, from a housing finance perspective, you have to ensure that apart from the titles and the construction, it also meets certain NDC guidelines. And if the construction does not meet those guidelines, technically you cannot go and fund, and that's why you many times come across situations where customers keep on saying that in spite of all these advertisements and affordability, banks and HFCs are not financing.
In fact, I would like to bring in Vaithianathan here. You were earlier talking about how bankers have actually started checking for the earthquake soundness of housing, because that is one of the NDC guidelines. What according to you is the biggest problem when you have to fund an affordable housing project?
See, the affordable housing project to be successful, a reasonable infrastructure should be in place. That has to be planned. Merely constructing a house or the apartments is not sufficient. We have to be really see that a primary school and a small hospital or a nursing home along with the housing units are present of 1,000 or 2,000 in number. Then the takeaways by the customers are quick. Recently I have gone through an example in Mumbai near Karjat. A very big builder is coming out with around 25,000 units in phase 1 and in phase 2 another 25,000. The cost of each apartment is going to be around 7.8 to 8 lakhs in that range. What is the USP? When they run through us as an housing finance company, we are going to do the construction finance for them. When they run through us, we have asked a few questions. Are you going to give a school up to 8th standard at least, and also keep a nursing home, and also a reasonably a good playground for the children to play, children play area? These three things, apart from the routine provisions and kind of vegetable small markets and a supermarket, mini supermarket. If these are all identified in phase 1, then it will be a kind of easy call decision taken by the customers, because as far as the customer is concerned or a bread earner is concerned, he can travel by motorcycle or scooter or whatever it be conveyance 2-3 kilometers to reach the Karjat station. From there he can reach 1 hour 20 minutes VT. So the infrastructure is a must for affordable housing success. So we have been insisting as a financier on that point. From the regulators' point of view, our request is, at present insurance on the credit life of the person who availed the loan as well as the property insurance, both are treated as non-housing items and the risk weightages given are high. If that is treated as a housing item, then we will be able to fund more affordable housing units, and the customer also will get the benefit if it is included as a part of the loan. So that, because he has to shell out for insurance, he has to shell out for stamp duty, he has to shell out for other charges. So it's all parts of the loan, and his own contribution considers all put together as a project cost. Then the customers will be willing to come and take a position on that. Instead of not having a shelter over their head, some roof will be there, and the housing for all 2020-22 will be definitely an achievable one by this process.
Right. So just to quickly run through, we've covered the quality of the developer, supply of affordable housing, land titles, approval, infrastructure, and the tax burden on consumers. Have we left anything on the table for Rakesh and Maneesh?
No, so if you look at 1/3 of India's population stays in the urban centers, and that's growing quite fast. And if you look at the shortfall in the housing, that's primarily in the urban centers, which we need to really provide, and the affordable housing which we are talking about is and 95% of this is the economically weaker section. How do we really reach out to them and provide them the affordable houses, and the way Mr. Oberoi mentioned earlier, 7,99,000, something like that, a quality product which we can offer, and also finance those projects. I think that's the challenge which we have in front of us. And the biggest issue in this is that it's not a very organized so far. There are not large developers who have come in. If there is a large developer who is building a project and you know that there is a track record of this developer, you can really take a bet, and you can, because there is a track record, you can go ahead and finance that development or that project. But these are all one-off small time developers. So I think somewhere the rating or some kind of parameters which needs to be fixed, that which projects one can do and the others one can avoid. The second is the customer segment also in this. There is no consistent repayment capability which you can establish. And from a traditional banking point of view, you cannot really reach out to this segment. How do you really build underwritings and everything else which is so differentiated that you can understand the repayment and give him a repayment flexibility, that he doesn't have to pay you on a monthly basis, but he can pay you 3 times a year or 4 times a year, something like that. So both on the organized developer point of view, it's a challenge that there is none right now. There are large developers who are getting into it because there are some tax benefits which has been declared. So they are coming, and that will help. And also the customer segment. How do we really understand their repayment capability and fix our repayments, not basis a EMI which is on a monthly basis, but how do we give them a flexibility which they are more comfortable paying us?
Maneesh, but just before you speak, I was having this conversation with a banker, an entrepreneur in fact, who set up one of these micro housing finance companies. And one of the first things he told me was, we actually went out in field and studied how people make their money. So they figured out that the sabzi wala in Dadar makes more money during the summer rather than during the rainy season.
True.
Because people apparently buy lesser amount of vegetables during the rainy season because it perishes faster. So he says that we have to then, like you said, we have to then decide our repayment, the entire EMI structure. We have to structure it in such a way that you can actually pay bulk of it during the summer months rather than the monsoon period, And that is something we'll discuss at length, Rakesh. But let me just bring Maneesh in first.
Yeah, so just to add to that, Kavita, I think those models can be perfected. You started off by saying that is there what kind of challenges do you face in lending to these customers? And to my mind, after being in this industry for about 4 or 5 years, being able to assess their suitability credit from a credit point of view is not really that much of a challenge. To the extent that the model can be perfected to saying that if you're lending to an auto rickshaw driver, if you find out from him how many kilometers he drives per day, his auto, you can actually figure out on the basis of templates that you've developed over a certain number of customers, what is the amount of loan that you can give him if you have the tenor and the interest rate kind of pinned down. So those models are now reaching a fairly advanced level of sophistication. Coming back to the point that you just said, that where really the challenge lies, and I think on that one I would agree with my co-panelists that supply continues to be a challenge. But I would like to offer a slightly different point of view, that we always think of supply as something which is going to be developer-led, something which is going to be project-led. When we talk about housing for all and the kind of supply that we need to see there, it requires, can we do it project by project? I don't think so. I think we need an explosion of supply all across the country because the task is huge, humongous. And one element of supply which almost always gets missed out is something which is self-build or self-supply. There is this large segment of customers who own a plot of land, who are wanting to construct. They can create their own supply. All that they need is transparency in terms of where they are constructing, whether that is the right place for them to construct, and they need simplification in approval norms. And that is where I think one of the biggest challenges people like us face, that corporation limits within cities end after a certain distance. What happens after that? Whose approval authority it is? Is this going to turn into a pond or a national highway or a recreational area 10 years down the line? One doesn't know. So if you're looking at providing housing for all 5 years hence, at least think 15 years hence and do the zoning for areas going out of big urban centers for a radius of about 60-70 kilometers, and not a city like Bombay. I'm talking about some of the smaller centers.
In fact, Maneesh, that's a huge ask considering the fact that Mumbai itself doesn't have a development plan. I mean, the last plan expired in 2012, and we are still waiting for BMC to come up with a plan that satisfies all the parties concerned. Having said that, coming back to the question of supply.
So that's if you remove the uncertainty, people who are wanting to finance these borrowers know for certain that you can go ahead, you can finance because his house or his layout kind of falls in a particular area where you can do that. The second aspect is that of developers who kind of finance, who construct in these localities. When you're looking at developers, developers always talk about delays in approval, and delays in approval is something which is an outcome resulting from two things, which is lack of percolation of the government policies top down. You know, in a city like Ahmedabad, there is an 80-kilometer circumference ring road. 3 years ago, an area of 1 kilometer from that was declared as an affordable housing zone. Now, such a large area declared as an affordable housing zone should have seen an explosion in affordable housing supply in that city. It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened because on the ground, there is not enough clarity in terms of how the zoning needs to be done, where the layouts need to come up, what is the kind of infrastructure which is going to come up where. And unless and until these things kind of get implemented, it is very difficult to go out and select. And I'm not talking about as a finance company, because finance follows where the customer goes. If the customer goes to that particular locality, starts buying, the finance company will follow. I think the finance companies have not been lagging behind in going where the customer wants to go. The distribution can be set up pretty quickly. There's not much cost involved in that. So that is where the government needs to kind of provide the necessary infrastructure. And finally, for the end borrower, we're talking about people, you know, who's a Kamwali, who's an auto driver, who's a small provision store owner. What does he know about which builder has what capacity to construct? What are his finances like? You know, when is he going to give the project? Is he going to kind of do it on time? And that's where, you know, the thing about having a mechanism where these guys can be certified that this is a guy from whom you can buy because an independent authority has checked him and found him to be kind of delivering on his commitments in the past. Finances are sound, everything is all right. Please go ahead and buy. That is where I think the buyer will be comfortable, because, you know, we can talk about all kinds of laws. We can talk about there's RERA, there's this law, there's that law. What is the capacity to litigate for a borrower at that level?
You know, more than the capacity to litigate, my concern here is that a lot of the buyers that you're actually speaking about may not even be able to read and understand the agreement that they're signing.
You are
For all you know,
right.
they are not even able to sign that agreement. They're probably just, you know, fingerprinting it. And if that is the case, then you are actually playing with that man's life savings, and you need to ensure that he gets a home at the end of it. And, you know, to bring in the issue of supply that you raised earlier, a lot of bankers I've spoken to also tell me that one of the reasons is that the RBI norms, the NHB norms, for what constitutes an affordable housing project, even the PMAY project, the scheme, what constitutes a project, what makes a project eligible for a PMAY tag, all of that is apparently the norms are so stringent and they are so, I was told, disconnected with reality, that it makes it very difficult for bankers to actually go out and finance these projects. Is that true?
I would not entirely agree with that. I think the PMAY norms have been fairly clearly laid out in the latest edition of the scheme that have come out. But I would agree with you to the extent that the word affordable is rather loosely used. And just this morning on the flight in, I was reading a newspaper article about affordable housing launches having gone up some 40-50%, and affordability was tagged to a unit which was costing about 10 times what Mr. Oberoi just said. 70 lakh unit was affordable. Well, it could be affordable to somebody, but to the vast segment of population that you're talking about, that's not affordable housing. But yes, I think coming back to the PMAY norms, I think as much clarity as can be provided under this scheme, I think has been provided. So I think, to be fair to the government, they've done a good job on that one.
Right.
Maneesh just said, see, by and large, you know, be it RBI or be it NHB, you know, the affordable, you know, the definition of affordable housing is what is used by MUPA, is what is followed across. And to that extent, the lending institution also, you know, follows the same one, because in order to get qualified for various refinance schemes and all that, and hence to the end user, you need to follow that. It's a question of whether the developers are using that formula as a basis to call it and qualify it as affordable housing is a question to be seen. And like Maneesh says, you know, affordable is interpreted in so many different ways. But I think, you ask any of the housing finance companies, they will usually tell you that affordable housing is what is defined as by MUPA and hence followed by both RBI and NHB. To that extent, there is enough clarity around that,
So what you're saying is the norms are clear. My question is, are there enough homes being built that actually follow those norms? Are there enough homes that are being built which you can actually go ahead and finance, which the RBI and the NHB norms allow you to finance?
I can answer in this way. There is a 60 square meter kind of a home under Prime Minister Awas Yojana is there. There are certain states like Rajasthan where they are very clear that no governmental approval is needed. If you have a land on your own, you can construct 60 square meter. This is the law is getting introduced in Punjab. If all other state governments also follow that kind of a principle, then lot of lead time in getting sanctioned by a common man going to the government and standing for months together to get the approval. They are not going to construct multi-story building kind of a thing, 60 square meter house. It's a simple, a very small makan for the people to live. Similarly, there are certain state governments like Tamil Nadu and Andhra, they have a very clear rule passed through the government gazette that the executive officer of the Gram Panchayat can approve the plan. Otherwise, the state like Maharashtra, they said it's only a developmental authority can approve. Even in Karjat, we will have to wait for the developmental authority of the particular municipal corporation to approve, or in Thane, it has to be approved by Thane Municipal Corporation. Even for 60 square meter kind of a building, we will have to go there, planning, we have to wait in the queue. These are all certain modifications if the government is looking into that and adopt the other state governments' proactive measures, then the affordable housing will grow in multifolds.
So yeah.
Staying with the theme of constructing in large numbers, anything which requires to be produced in large numbers needs to follow a certain element of standardization. You cannot have custom built large scale production. And that's where I think there is a need for standardization of these norms. Now, he just talked about 2-3 states, and all of these are different. The norms for approval in the peri-urban areas are all different. And that is where really the complexity, and putting myself in a developer's shoes really, that is where the complexity comes from.
You know, Maneesh, we have quite a few developers in the affordable housing space who have sort of pioneered the concept of assembly line manufacturing of houses. So they are working with prefab, they are getting in, they are making their own material on site, and you know, they are making those houses.
Which is a good thing from a construction point of view.
So do you think, are you saying that the government should probably come up with a standardized set of approvals or norms that will govern affordable housing across the country?
Precisely. I'm saying exactly that if you standardize the norms for approval, and if you standardize the rules to a certain extent across the country, you know, you could probably have 10 Karams being replicated across the country, and that's going to be an explosion of demand. There are 10 guys, 15 guys, 20 guys who've come out in a certain geography in a country trying to do affordable housing. These are all well-intentioned people trying to keep the cost down without compromising on the quality of life of the end buyer. We need to encourage such people to take their mission and to take their aspirations all over the country. So 10 developers constructing 50,000 homes suddenly start expanding all across the country and have an explosion of housing. But as we see, there is not one national level developer. You cannot say there is one developer who's got successful projects going on in 10 different states. Not one can be named. Whereas if that is something which is made possible, then that will see a huge amount of increase in supply. So
the government has made a sort of a beginning with RERA. There is a standardized agreement that has been made, a builder-buyer agreement, also that which has been written by the center, which they are asking states to adopt. There is a uniform building code. Now, do you think this is a good time to, you know, sort of push through these standard set of approvals for affordable housing?
If I can just add one point, I think we should look at new technology of constructions. How do we really bring down the time taken to build a project? Because in this segment, a customer who is taking a house, he's paying the rent as well. So he's paying the EMI and he's paying the rent as well. So if we can crunch the time with the new technology, and you mentioned about the prefabricated technologies and all, I think we should look at and explore these new technology to bring down the cost of construction and crunch the time of construction. And that will be very, very critical and important for this segment.
The builders are basically standalone projects. There are not many, like big builders are just entering. So standalone projects form a large proportion of the supply that is there in the market right now. I think a prefab and all those things, if capital expenditure is high, then these people may not be able to afford that at the moment to come out with something like that. So if that is made a norm, it might become a little tough for the smaller builders who are in the market to really come up with
But duty exemptions can help if somebody is willing to import that technology.
It's available in different, in other countries, and you can import these material.
So some kind of duty exemption and those kind of things can help. I think, and bringing the capex down for those builders, I think it can help. But that is something which will need to be done in that.
Right. The other issue that came up was land titles. Now we know that a lot of states in the country are actually trying to digitize land titles. Maharashtra, we know, is undertaking a satellite survey as we speak. Do you think that will solve the problem? Like you said, the uncertainty of whether this land that I inherited from my grandfather actually belongs to me or belongs to, in whole, or does it belong to any of my siblings? Will that actually solve the problem?
Actually, it is like a demat form of a share. Before the physical shares were there, lot of issues, duplicate shares, printing of shares, all the issues are sorted out once the shares have become in a demat form. Similarly, the land records like USA, if you also make it a digitized, at least phase one is a digitization, second is the demat form. The sub-registrar office will not able to, or not sub-registrar, even the other, like other kind of an agency who can go for a registration of the title or change of transfer of ownership from one person to another person. If it in a demat form, if it is exist, then it will be a very clear proof that no fraudulent things can take place. But present today we are facing with huge problems. Even the gifted ancestral properties, if you look at it, chain records or chain parental documents are missing. With the result, banks, public sector banks will not be able to fund. We as HFCs will land into that. We take some risk and fund them, taking into account that 20 years or 30 years of stay by the landowners. If government comes out with some clear guideline, those who stay for more than 15 years in a particular land, and even though chain records are missing, they are the real owners of the land by way of a digitization certificate, that it will help especially in the rural places and in hamlets. It will become a very big boost for affordable housing to grow in individual houses.
Right. We are left with three more issues. One is, of course, infrastructure, which is a biggie. I'm leaving builder quality for the last because that is something that I want to address separately. And the tax burden. Very quickly, we are seeing the rollout of GST, and we know that home buyers are paying a humongous amount as stamp duty. In Maharashtra, I know when I bought a home, I had to pay something like 6% stamp duty and 1% for registration, which is 7% of my pocket. By the time I end up buying that home, having paid my service tax and all of that, I'm paying something around like 10 to 12% of that cost of the home only in taxes. That is a huge sum for someone to pay to own a home, and this is not covered by a home loan. So how can that be addressed? And do you think that this is the fact that we are rolling out GST, we are moving towards a single tax regime? Is this a good time for the government to actually think of standardizing stamp duty rates across the country? And will states be open to that?
Absolutely. One word answer. The government has taken the steps to now say what constitutes affordable homes. I think that definition is now more or less clear. If we can take that a step further and say anything which is up to 25 lakhs attracts a standard stamp duty across the country. And the GST is as good a time as any to kind of roll that out. There are various positive headwinds that can support such a move. One, that this is a very large constituency across almost all states, and therefore there should be very little opposition to whatever is the supposed loss of tax revenue from this segment of customers. And secondly, it will reduce the burden for borrowers, like you just said, that 5%, 7%, which is to be paid at the fag end of the transaction, can tend to be quite backbreaking, and that is and will continue to remain an unfinanceable component.
So you don't envisage a situation where at some point in time the home loan will actually cover the stamp duty and the registration? And why shouldn't it? I mean, it's at the end of the day, it goes into that house that I'm buying.
Yes, I think in affordable homes you can cover that to a certain extent, but I'm saying that still it is something on which the customer still ends up paying a certain outgo. There are other costs associated with the purchase which are not apparent initially. There is maybe he's paying brokerage or he's paying other costs and everything, the cost of moving in. So there are a number of other hidden costs which are not immediately apparent to the housing finance company. But an overall lessening of the burden, I think, is a good thing for this segment.
Just to add, maybe we can look at for this segment, reduce the tax burden, especially the stamp duty and registration. So for this segment, where we want to really push affordable housing, I think we should waive off, or it should be very, very nominal in terms of. So I think that's the recommendation we should do to the government.
So what you're essentially saying is, you don't have to reduce the stamp duty in a blanket fashion across the country, but cross subsidize.
Yes.
Let the rich pay whatever they're paying, but if
for this segment, yes, you should
this
look at.
This segment you can reduce.
Yeah.
Great. Also the issue of, infrastructure. You brought it up, one of you also brought it up, the fact that most of these houses are built in the outskirts of cities, and there is really no way to get to the city, and unless you have that vital infrastructure link, why is anybody going to live over there? So, I mean, we know that typically in India, infrastructure follows development, which is what we've generally seen, except in the case of Hyderabad, where probably the infrastructure was made first and now they're actually looking at real estate development.
No,
how can you resist?
No, so I don't think infrastructure is a basic issue in this country. So forget whether it's outskirts or inside the city. If you look at Mumbai, inside the city, the infrastructure is not there, and that's a challenge with this country. I think, see, unavailability of land is such a big issue, and whenever you build affordable housing, you will have to go out on the peripheries where the land can be made available for these projects. And unless you connect that to the main centers, the town where the individual comes to work, if you are not able to connect that, then this affordable segment and all, there will be hesitancy in people to really go and stay there. So building the infrastructure is such an important, critical part of really affordable housing, because unless you really make the schooling, the healthcare, the commute, everything seamless and easy, I don't think this really succeeds. So infrastructure is very, very critical to the affordable housing.
Which kind of brings us back to the entire issue of zoning and having a proper master plan in place, which will then probably give impetus to affordable housing.
Why do you do that? I was thinking as Rakesh was speaking, that what does infrastructure finally boil down to for the customer or the borrower who's going to be staying there? It essentially boils down to two things, and those in our experience are the most critical for him: the ability to commute and schooling for the children. Really, if these two things are taken care of, all the other things can be taken care of. We have had examples of people who have gone 20 kilometers, 25 kilometers away from their source of livelihood and started staying there because the schooling was available. And said, if I have to travel 1.5 hours, I will make that sacrifice to give a good quality of life to my family. So essentially, infrastructure stripped down to the core really boils down to the ability to commute and the schooling for the child. Commute, when it comes to larger cities, is essentially if you can extend train connectivity or some kind of public transport connectivity to those areas. If you can take care of this, I think over a period of time, local industriousness and all the other supply factors will come together. Suddenly one provision store will come in, 2 vada pav stalls will come in, and before you know it, you have a thriving commercial area, catering to the requirements of the family and their entertainment needs and everything. All of that will come in. But to get people to move, these two, to my mind, I think are most crucial.
Water and electricity and those kind of things have to be.
Those will make it livable, yes.
Those will make it livable.
Otherwise, it will not be livable at all.
Okay, and now coming back to the last one, which is kind of tied in, the reputation of the developer and, to my mind, the customer's repayment, because what we are seeing at least is that with the amount of delays that is happening and the amount of customers who are stuck, home buyers who are stuck paying EMIs and rent, a lot of them have started calling us and they're actually asking us whether they should stop paying EMIs. For the simple reason that the house that they're paying for is not being built. That project is stuck. So what am I paying? I'm paying all that money for. I would rather put that money in some other ready to move in property and actually have a home at the end of the day. And this is a question that people are raising and I feel it's quite valid. So how do you really address the issue of builder quality, especially in a space like affordable housing, where again, like we discussed earlier, people may not know how to read and write. So what do you do there?
I think that is where educating the customer on their rights. And that is something that housing finance companies will have to do, affordable housing finance companies will have to do. Unless and until that is done, they won't know who to approach to, for some kind of a redressal for their problems. That's not going to happen. So unless and until they are educated on their rights, the regulations and those kind of things will not move. I think that's what will need to be done.
How far are housing finance companies willing to go, Maneesh, in the sense that when you say educate the customers, like you said, are you willing to actually handhold that man who's sitting with that agreement that he cannot read?
No, with your own customers, and there's an asset risk involved. So if at all, a delay starts happening or whatever, I think at that stage, the housing finance companies would be in touch with the customer till possession happens and those kind of things.
We housing finance companies have got a professional setup. So what we do normally when we assess a project, if we give a construction finance for affordable housing, we make it a practice that a proper escrow account mechanism is built in and all the approvals have been in place. Sales milestones are put for the release of funds for the construction of the project, and also the other conditional approvals, the conditions which are laid down for the approvals have all been met with. Once we adhere to all these things, naturally the project will move properly and reach a desirable success. If housing finance companies can play a very good role in this, if it is not done and the developer on his own raising a fund and he has
which is what I want to know. What is the role that housing finance companies can actually play over here? Because very frankly, what I am seeing is this, that a home buyer has to continue paying his EMI. He has no recourse. I mean, if I stop paying my EMI today, my CIBIL record will go for a toss, and tomorrow if I am admitted in my hospital or somebody else in my family is admitted in the hospital, I am not going to get a loan.
True.
So how can housing finance companies really help people who are stuck in projects like this, and how can you ensure that the buyer doesn't get stuck in a project like this? How can you educate the buyer?
Kavita, to answer this, to that extent, if we go to the root cause, a large root cause of all these issues came up when you had those, cash down proposals, that, builder had launched a project and all you could see were different multicolored flags on the land, and he said that this is how the project is going to look at, and he would give you a cash down proposal to say that, look, if you pay me 100% now, I'm going to give you so much of discount. And today those projects are stuck somewhere halfway and they are not seeing the end of the construction to happen, and they have stopped paying EMIs or their CIBIL gets affected and things like that, and they are also paying rent. Now to that extent, if you see, there has been a heavy clamp on those kind of funding by the housing finance companies, and to that extent large credit also goes to the regulators who saw that this is how the money is going, and that's where that's where the money got diverted also, thinking that this project would get complete as the sales happen. So to that extent, housing finance companies and the banks have stopped doing all those cash down fundings, which has stopped resulting in those situations where the construction does not happen. Apart from that,
Harshil, tell me this. All of you all follow a basic model when it comes to rating companies. When you finance a company, and I'm spending some time on this, I'm running out of time so we need to be brief. When you finance a company, you do a thorough due diligence of that particular project. You rate that project and then accordingly decide at what interest rate you're going to lend to them. Can you make that rating public? Can you let the buyer be a part of this and know what is the risk that you are willing to take? Is it possible?
Yes. Is it the preferred way to go? Maybe there is a slightly better option. Because in a certain sense...
What is the option?
In a certain sense, the housing finance company has got a bit of a vested interest in that. Because the buyer is going to be coming and taking the loan from you, and therefore you tend to kind of have a vested interest in the entire approach. My point is that there is an entire rating machinery, an independent rating machinery which exists in the form of all the rating agencies. We can resort to that. We can use that to give an independent, unbiased rating of the developer, make it public to the borrower. Because coming back to the point that I said earlier, is that this is a set of customers, this is a set of borrowers who do not have it in them to go through the litigation route. Something goes wrong, you can through RERA, you can kind of...
Let me bring in Rakesh very quickly. I've got two more questions from the audience.
No, one just suggestion, and we were talking about digitization of the title deeds and all. I think to bring in transparency, we have to create online digital enablers to the customer so that they can see all approvals are in place, and then only they invest and then only they buy the product from that developer. Otherwise, no. So I think we will have to, the government will have to bring in some transparency that this project is approved by all regulators, all agencies, and then one can really buy the product.
So some kind of a rating for developers. There are two questions that have come in from the audience. Ashish Gulati wants to know, he says, shouldn't affordable housing parameters be declared as the per capita income of states to ease home buying? If Ashish Gulati is here, why don't you just stand up and... Yeah. Can you elaborate what you meant? Right. Which I think RBI has done to an extent with their definition, the revised definition.
the definition is very clearly defined. It is on the basis of the income, and it is also on the basis of the size of the unit which is being built, and it is also divided at the basis, that how much of that can be classified as economically weaker section, which is EWS. The second is the LIG, MIG, and then the HIG. So those definitions are very much standardized, which is basis the area of the unit of the house, dwelling unit as they call it, and also the income levels of an individual, basis which the definition, it gets classified whether it falls under EWS or it falls under LIG or it falls under MIG. So to that extent, these definitions are available. Now it's a question of whether the construction which is happening, are those construction happening as per those definition or not, it needs to be seen.
Right. Another question, last question, Vivekanand had a question. Is he there in the audience? Okay, very quickly, it's an interesting question. Now he says, with the high level of migrant and floating population in metros, can temporary or night shelters be a proposition or a PPP option? In fact, rental housing would also tie in with this. Would you want to take it up?
No, so I might just give it a try. I think it's a good idea and one should. instead of sleeping, letting our citizens sleep on the streets, we should provide night shelters for a very nominal charges that people, so we should build infrastructure in all the urban centers where people can sleep in the night and can refresh there. So definitely yes.
Right. With that, we will have to close this discussion, but a very quick rundown of of the solutions that you all came up with. Essentially, it is necessary to certify builders. From the government side, what needs to be certify builders and also get the information out to buyers that this particular project has got all its approvals in place. The other big thing is that governments need to get their act together. They need to have clear zoning plans in place, and they need to think for the next 15 or 20 years. Land titles need to be digitized, need to be taken online, so you and I know what exactly we are buying into. DMAT titles, in fact, is what Mr. Vaithianathan said, and also standardized approvals. That is a biggie over there. Infrastructure is one big thing that the government needs to work on. The other big thing is standardized approvals. Just the way, like we have a standard definition for affordable housing, it's probably time that the government comes up with a standard set of approvals for affordable housing, which will enable developers to replicate projects across cities. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Krishnan, and may I also request you to please present with a prize for our best question. The first question, can we have the gentleman on stage, please, to accept the prize? Let's put our hands together for him. We know he's very active in the social media, and if you put up questions for our next panel discussion, you're sure to get your question up here and win yourself a prize. So, Ms. Krishnan, may I request you to please present the gift to the gentleman? And once again, let's put our hands together for all our panelists. Thank you for making it an interactive session. May I request Dharmesh Kapoor from our team to please step on stage and thank each one of our panelists and our panel chair for their presence and for putting up a great session there. What a pleasure, sir. Thank you so very much for sharing your views. Thank you, Ms. Krishnan, for chairing the panel discussion. Thank you, sir. And may I request all of you to join us for a group picture. We'd love to have all of you in a frame. Dharmesh, why don't you join us? A group picture with your brilliant smiles on. Let's put our hands together for them yet again. Thank you so very much for joining us.